The deep hum of the USS Defiance engines filled the bridge as Admiral George Bennett gazed at the stars through the massive view screen. 3 months into their deep space mission, and the excitement of exploration still hadn't worn off. Imran was now just a distant memory, a tiny blue dot they had left behind to push humanity's boundaries further into the unknown. "Admiral, long-range sensors are picking up something," Lieutenant Karen Jones said, her fingers moving quickly across her console. "Multiple objects approaching from Sector 7. Bennett straightened in his command chair. "How many objects are we talking about, Lieutenant?" "Initial readings suggest thousands, sir." A hush fell over the bridge. Captain Lisa Morgan moved to stand beside Bennett, her expression serious but calm. "Thoughts, Admiral?" "Let's not jump to conclusions," Bennett replied. "Chief Wright, what can you tell us?" Chief Science Officer Alan Wright hunched over his station, adjusting settings and analyzing data. "Definitely artificial constructs, sir, moving in formation. Their propulsion signatures are interesting. Less efficient than ours, but they're making decent speed." Bennett nodded. The USS Defiant was humanity's newest and most advanced warship, leading a squadron of 11 other vessels. After centuries of warfare on Earth, humans had finally united and turned their innovation outward to the stars. Their ships contained technology that would have seemed like magic just 100 years ago: gravity manipulation drives, quantum-entangled communication, systems and weapons derived from both fusion technology and harnessed dark matter. "Open a channel to the fleet," Bennett ordered. When the communications officer nodded, he continued. "All ships, this is Admiral Bennett. We have multiple contacts approaching. Maintain formation, defensive posture Delta, but no aggressive actions. This could be our first contact with a major galactic civilization. Let's make a good impression." Captain Morgan smiled slightly. "Always the diplomat, George." "Someone has to be," Bennett replied with a small smile of his own. "Humanity didn't get this far by shooting first and asking questions later." The bridge crew continued their preparations as the unknown fleet drew closer. Engineer Paul Davis entered the bridge and moved to Wright's station, both men speaking in hushed, excited tones as they analyzed the approaching vessels. "Sir," Davis called out, unable to hide the amusement in his voice. "These ships, their technology is at least a century behind ours. Their power distribution systems are wildly inefficient, and those weapon signatures? We developed better systems before we even left our solar system." Bennett raised an eyebrow. "Don't get overconfident, Paul. Numbers can overwhelm technology." "Yes, sir," Davis replied, though he still looked amused. Morgan leaned closer to Bennett. "Think they're hostile?" "Let's find out. Open hailing frequencies, all languages and formats." Minutes passed as the human fleet waited, broadcasting greetings and peaceful intentions across all known communication methods. The alien fleet continued to approach, spreading out in what was clearly a strategic formation. "They're surrounding us," Jones noted calmly from her weapons station. "Still no response to our hails," the communications officer added. Bennett frowned. "Continue broadcasting. Let's give them time to—" The view screen suddenly flickered and an image appeared. The creature looking back at them had gray-blue skin, 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, and what appeared to be breathing gills along its neck. It wore an elaborate uniform covered in what Bennett guessed were medals and symbols of rank. "Attention, primitive vessels," the alien said, its words translated by the ship's computers. "I am High Admiral Vextor of the glorious Zarkonian Empire, rulers of 3,000 star systems and conquerors of countless species. You have entered Imperial space without permission. Your ships and crew are now property of the Empire. Prepare to be boarded and processed." Bennett exchanged a look with Morgan before clearing his throat. "High Admiral Vextor. I am Admiral George Bennett of the United Earth Defense Fleet. We are on a peaceful exploration mission, and were unaware this region was claimed by any civilization. We apologize for any misunderstanding and would welcome a diplomatic discussion." All 4 of Vextor's eyes blinked in what seemed like surprise. "There is nothing to discuss. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed." "I understand your position," Bennett continued calmly. "But surely there's room for dialogue here. We represent a peaceful civilization interested in trade and cultural exchange. The alien commander stared at the screen, clearly confused by the lack of fear or panic from the humans. Perhaps I am not making myself clear. The Zarkonian Empire does not negotiate with primitives. The fact that you have achieved space travel is impressive for your kind, but your technology is no match for the might of our armada. Davis coughed into his hand, trying to hide a laugh which earned him a stern look from Bennett. "Hi, Admiral." Bennett tried again. "We have no wish for conflict. Our scans show your fleet is impressive indeed. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting between representatives of our peoples to discuss terms that would benefit both our civilizations." Vex Tour's gills fluttered in what Bennett guessed was irritation or perhaps confusion. "You wish to negotiate? When faced with the might of the Zarkonian Empire, that would be our preference, yes." The alien commander turned to speak with someone off-screen, clearly agitated. When he turned back, his tone was even more hostile. "Very well. We will send a diplomatic vessel to your lead ship. If this is a trick, your destruction will be especially painful." The communication ended abruptly. Morgan turned to Bennett with a raised eyebrow. "Well, that went well," Bennett sighed. "Prepare a reception area for our guests, full diplomatic protocol, and alert Dr. Miller. We'll need her expertise." "And if they're not actually coming to talk?" Jones asked from her station. "Then we defend ourselves, but only as necessary," Bennett replied firmly. "No first strikes, no excessive force." As the crew prepared for the arrival of the Zarkonian delegation, Davis approached Bennett. "Admiral, I've completed my analysis of their fleet. Their weapons can't penetrate our shields, and their engines would overload if they tried to match our maneuverability. That information stays on the bridge, understand?" Bennett said quietly. "The last thing we need is for our people to get cocky." Davis nodded but couldn't hide his grin. "Yes, sir, but you have to admit it's pretty funny. They think we're the primitives." 2 hours later, the bridge crew watched as a Zarkonian shuttle approached the Defiant. It was ornate, covered in what appeared to be decorative metalwork that served no practical purpose and likely added unnecessary weight to the vessel. "They really do like to show off, don't they?" Morgan commented. Bennett stood straightening his uniform. "Dr. Miller has been briefed?" "Yes, sir. She's waiting in the diplomatic reception room with her team." "Good. Captain Morgan, you have the bridge. I'm going to welcome our guests." As Bennett walked toward the elevator, he couldn't help but smile slightly. Humanity's first encounter with a galactic empire wasn't going quite how anyone had imagined. But if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was adapting to unexpected situations and teaching arrogant empires a lesson in humility. Admiral Bennett stood in the diplomatic reception room as the airlock cycled. Behind him, Dr. Susan Miller and her small team of diplomats waited calmly. The room had been prepared carefully, comfortable seating arranged in a circle to avoid any impression of hierarchy, refreshment suitable for various biological needs, and subtle security measures that would be nearly impossible to detect. "Remember," Bennett said quietly, "we represent all of humanity today." The airlock doors slid open with a soft hiss. 6 Zarkonians entered the room, led by a figure wearing elaborate robes adorned with metallic threads and small, glowing gems. Unlike the military commander they had seen on screen, this Zarkonian had pale green skin with intricate patterns that Bennett guessed might indicate social status. "Welcome aboard the USS Defiant," Bennett said, stepping forward with his hands, open in what humans recognized as a universal gesture of peace. "I am Admiral George Bennett." The lead Zarkonian looked down at Bennett. The aliens were nearly 7 feet tall and spoke in a voice that seemed deliberately loud. "I am Ambassador Krell of the Zarkonian Empire. I speak with the direct authority of Emperor Zorvax, ruler of 3,000 worlds and conqueror of the 7 spiral arms." Bennett nodded respectfully. "May I introduce Dr. Susan Miller, our chief diplomat?" Miller stepped forward with a warm smile. "We are honored by your presence, Ambassador Krell. Please join us." She gestured to the seating area. Krell looked at the circular arrangement with obvious distaste. "You expect me to sit as an equal with primitives?" "We offer seating for your comfort," Miller replied smoothly. If you prefer another arrangement, we are happy to accommodate. This seemed to confuse the ambassador, who had clearly expected either submission or offense. After a moment of visible indecision, he motioned to his guards. Bring me the imperial seat. Two of the guards left and returned moments later carrying an ornate chair that must have been brought from their shuttle. They placed it slightly above the level of the human seating, and Krell sat with obvious satisfaction. Much better, he said. Now we may begin. I have brought the terms of your surrender and integration into the Empire. Miller sat across from him, her expression pleasant and interested. We would be pleased to review your proposal, Ambassador. One of Krell's aides handed him a metallic tablet, which he activated with a touch. A holographic document appeared above it. The terms are standard for species of your development level, Krell began, his tone becoming formal. All planetary. Resources will be cataloged and allotted according to Imperial need. Your military vessels will be decommissioned, with suitable ships repurposed for Imperial use. Your population will be assessed for suitable roles within the Imperial hierarchy, with most likely assigned to resource extraction and agriculture. As he continued listing terms that amounted to complete human subjugation, Bennett noticed Dr. Miller calmly taking notes on her own tablet. The other humans in the room maintained professional expressions, though Bennett could see Chief Engineer Paul Davis barely containing his amusement. In return, Krell concluded, you will receive Imperial protection and guidance, medical advancements that will extend your primitive lifespans by at least 20 of your years, and the opportunity for exceptional individuals to rise through Imperial service. He looked up from the document. These are generous terms. Many species receive far less favorable conditions. Miller nodded thoughtfully. Thank you for this comprehensive proposal, Ambassador. If I may ask a few clarifying questions? Krell blinked all four eyes in succession, clearly surprised by the calm response. You may. For the next hour, Miller led a detailed discussion of various points in the document, asking for clarification on resource quotas, human autonomy limitations, and integration protocols. Her questions were precise and intelligent, occasionally causing Krell's aides to huddle together in whispered consultation before answering. Meanwhile, Davis had positioned himself near one of the guards and was subtly scanning the alien's equipment. With a small device disguised as a standard communication tool, Bennett noticed the engineer's expression grow increasingly amused as data appeared on his screen. Finally, Miller placed her tablet on her lap and smiled at Krell. Ambassador, we appreciate your time and the detailed information you've provided. After careful consideration, we must respectfully decline your offer of integration into the Zarkonian Empire. Silence fell over the room. Krell's gills fluttered rapidly. You decline? He finally managed. Yes, Miller replied simply. While we are interested in establishing diplomatic relations with the Zarkonian Empire, we wish to do so as an independent civilization. Perhaps we could discuss a treaty of mutual recognition and non-aggression instead. Krell stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You misunderstand the situation. This is not a negotiation. These are the terms of your surrender. Bennett stepped forward. Ambassador, we understand your position, but surely there's room for dialogue between our civilizations. We have much to offer each other through peaceful exchange. Offer? What could primitives possibly offer the Empire? Krell demanded. Davis cleared his throat. Well, for starters, propulsion systems that are roughly 60% more efficient than yours. Your current designs waste tremendous energy through radiation bleed. One of Krell's aides gasped audibly. Engineer Davis, Bennett said in a warning tone. Davis shrugged. Just making conversation, Admiral. Krell's skin had darkened to a deep green. You dare to claim technological superiority? Your tiny fleet, against our armada? We make no claims of superiority, Ambassador, Miller interjected smoothly. We merely suggest that each of our civilizations has developed different technologies and approaches that could benefit the other through peaceful exchange. This meeting is over, Krell announced. You have made a grave error today. The Empire does not tolerate rejection. He gestured sharply to his entourage, who quickly gathered around him. You have one of your planetary rotations to reconsider. After that, we will take by force what you refuse to give willingly." As the Zarkonians moved toward the exit, Miller called out, "Ambassador, regardless of your decision, we have prepared data packets about human civilization and history that might help you understand our position better. Would you like to accept them as a gesture of goodwill?" Krell paused, then motioned to an aide who reluctantly accepted a small data crystal from Miller. Without another word, the Zarkonians left the room. As the airlock closed behind them, Davis let out a low whistle. "Well, that went well." Bennett sighed. "Dr. Miller, what do you think?" Miller's professional demeanor softened slightly. "They're completely unprepared for a species that doesn't immediately submit. Their entire diplomatic approach assumes instant capitulation through intimidation. When that failed, they had no backup strategy." "So they'll attack," Bennett concluded. Miller nodded. "Almost certainly. Their cultural framework doesn't allow for alternatives. To them, we're either subjects or enemies." "Paul," Bennett turned to the engineer, "what did you learn from their equipment?" Davis grinned widely. "Their technology is quaint. Their power cells are running at maybe 40% efficiency compared to ours. Their weapons are essentially focused radiation. Our shields will eat that up like candy. And their communication devices? Let me put it this way. We'd be able to hear everything they're saying without even trying to listen in." Bennett took a deep breath. "All right. Looks like we need to prepare for a demonstration, but remember, defensive measures only. No one fires unless fired upon, and no lethal force unless absolutely necessary." "And the data crystal I gave them?" Miller asked with a small smile. "What was on it?" Bennett asked. "Earth history. Specifically detailed accounts of how humans respond to attempted conquest." Davis laughed. "That should give them some light bedtime reading." The bridge of the USS Defiant hummed with focused activity as the crew prepared for the inevitable confrontation. Admiral Bennett stood by the main view screen, watching as the Zarkonian fleet rearranged itself into attack formation. Thousands of ships moved in perfect coordination, forming a sphere around the much smaller human squadron. "They certainly know how to put on a show," Captain Lisa Morgan commented as she joined Bennett. "It would be impressive if it wasn't so unnecessary," Bennett replied. He turned to Lieutenant Karen Jones at the weapons station. "Status report?" "All defensive systems at full capacity, Admiral," Jones reported. "Non-lethal response options. Programmed and ready. The rest of the fleet reports the same." Bennett nodded. "And communications?" "We're still broadcasting peace messages on all frequencies," the communications officer replied. "No response, but we are picking up a lot of chatter between their ships." "Can we understand any of it?" Bennett asked. "Yes, sir. Their encryption is, well, it's not very effective against our systems. They're discussing attack patterns. The High Admiral is quite confident about their victory." Engineer Paul Davis snorted from where he was monitoring the power systems. "Of course he is." Bennett shot him a stern look before addressing the bridge. "Listen carefully, everyone. What happens in the next few hours will likely be remembered as humanity's first major interstellar conflict. I want it to also be remembered for our restraint. No aggressive actions, no preemptive strikes. Defensive protocols only. Is that understood?" A chorus of "Yes, sir" echoed around the bridge. "Sir," Chief Science Officer Alan Wright called out, "I'm detecting energy buildups in their weapon systems. They're preparing to fire." Bennett sighed. "One last try. Open a channel." The view screen flickered to show High Admiral Vexatur on his command deck, surrounded by Zarkonian officers. "High Admiral," Bennett began, "I urge you to reconsider. There is no need for conflict between our peoples. We remain open to peaceful—" "Your time has expired," Vexatur interrupted. "Your failure to accept the generous terms of the Empire has sealed your fate. You will serve as an example to any other species who might consider defiance." He made a cutting gesture with one hand. "End transmission." The screen went dark. "Well, we tried," Morgan said. Bennett nodded. "All ships. Defensive posture. Activate shields and prepare for impact." Moments later, The space around the human vessels lit up as thousands of Zarkonian ships opened fire simultaneously. Beams of energy and explosive projectiles streaked toward the human fleet. The bridge crew watched calmly as the attacks hit their shields. Instead of the expected explosions and damage, the shields glowed brightly, patterns of light rippling across their surfaces. "Shield status?" Bennett asked. "Holding at 97%, sir," Jones reported, sounding almost bored. "The energy weapons are actually being absorbed by our adaptive shielding. Power reserves are increasing by 3% from the input." Davis laughed out loud. "They're charging our batteries." Even Bennett couldn't help a small smile. "Let's not get too comfortable. Damage reports from the rest of the fleet." "All ships reporting minimal shield depletion," Morgan answered after checking her console. "No damage to any vessels." The Zarkonian attack continued for several minutes, a spectacular light show that accomplished nothing beyond strengthening the human shields. Eventually, the attack paused. "They're reassessing," Wright observed. "I think they're surprised we're still here." The view screen activated again. Vexatur's face appeared, his gills fluttering rapidly in what Bennett now recognized as agitation. "What trickery is this?" the High Admiral demanded. "Our weapons should have destroyed your puny vessels." Bennett kept his tone respectful. "High Admiral, as I tried to explain, we have no wish for conflict, but we are capable of defending ourselves. I again invite you to cease hostilities and engage in peaceful dialogue." "Never," Vexatur spat. "All ships, concentrate fire on their command vessel." The transmission cut out. Bennett looked at Jones. "I think it's time for a proportional response. Demonstration pattern alpha." "Yes, sir," Jones replied, her fingers dancing across her console. "Targeted electromagnetic pulses. Ready. Non-lethal, systems-only impact." The Defiant shuddered slightly as it released a series of precisely targeted energy pulses. Unlike the bright beams of the Zarkonian weapons, these were nearly invisible to the naked eye, detectable only by the subtle ripple of space as they passed. On the view screen, the crew watched as the pulses reached their targets. One by one, Zarkonian ships began to drift, their lights flickering and engines shutting down. "EMP successful," Jones reported. 53 enemy vessels disabled. Their life support systems remain functional, but weapons, engines, and communications are offline. Bennett nodded. "Good. Captain Morgan, your turn." Morgan smiled slightly. Initiating gravity manipulation fields. From 3 other human ships, invisible fields extended outward. The effect was immediate and startling. Dozens of Zarkonian vessels suddenly found themselves caught in localized gravity wells, gently but firmly pushed aside from their attack positions. Others were held completely immobile, unable to maneuver despite their engines straining at full power. 127 more enemy ships neutralized, Morgan reported. No structural damage to any of them. The battle, if it could even be called that, continued for another 20 minutes. The human fleet systematically disabled or immobilized hundreds of Zarkonian vessels without destroying a single one. They used targeted electromagnetic pulses, gravity fields, and precision energy beams that severed weapon mounts without penetrating hulls. When nearly half the Imperial fleet had been neutralized, Bennett opened communications again. "High Admiral," he said to the visibly shaken Vexatur. "I think we've made our point. We could continue, but I see no purpose in further demonstration. Your ships have not been seriously damaged, and your crews remain unharmed. This restraint is deliberate." Vexatur stared at Bennett with all 4 eyes wide. "What are you?" he finally asked, his voice much quieter than before. "We are humans," Bennett replied simply. "A species that has learned through centuries of our own conflicts that victory through destruction is no victory at all. We would much rather gain a friend than defeat an enemy." For several long moments, Vexatur was silent. The bridge crew of the Defiant waited patiently. "You could have destroyed us," the High Admiral finally said. "It wasn't a question." "We could have," Bennett acknowledged. "We chose not to." Another long pause. Then, "I will consult with the Imperial Council. We'll be here." Bennett said, with a nod. The transmission ended. Morgan turned to Bennett. Do you think they'll actually consider peace now? Bennett shrugged. Hard to say. Their entire culture is built around conquest and domination. This might be the first time they've encountered something they can't simply overpower. Well, Davis said with a grin, at least they now know not to judge a species by the size of its fleet. Lieutenant Jones rolled her eyes at the engineer. Very profound, Paul. Bennett looked around at his crew, feeling a surge of pride. Stand. Down from battle stations but maintain defensive posture. And someone get me Dr. Miller. I think we might finally get that diplomatic discussion she was hoping for. As the crew relaxed slightly, Bennett gazed out at the stars and the scattered Zarkonian fleet. Some ships drifted powerless, others remained frozen in gravity fields, while the rest had pulled back to a respectful distance. Not a single life lost, not a single ship destroyed. He smiled quietly to himself. Perhaps this was how humanity would make its mark on the galaxy, not through conquest but through restraint. 3 days after the one-sided battle, Admiral Bennett stood in the Defiant's largest conference room, which had been transformed for the occasion. The circular table that dominated the center could seat 30 people comfortably. Displays around the room showed images of Earth and other human colonies, alongside diagrams of various technologies and cultural artifacts. Dr. Susan Miller approached Bennett, looking pleased. The Zarkonian delegation will arrive in 20 minutes, Admiral. A much larger group than last time. How many? Bennett asked. 15 representatives, scientists, engineers, military officers, and cultural experts, not just diplomats. It seems High Admiral Vexator convinced the Imperial Council that we're worth getting to know. Bennett nodded. Good. I've asked Captain Morgan to lead our team, with support from our best specialists. I'll observe, but let her handle the proceedings. A wise choice, Miller agreed. Morgan has excellent diplomatic instincts. The doors opened as crew members brought in final preparations. Engineer Paul Davis entered carrying several small devices. All set with the demonstrations? Bennett asked him. Davis grinned. Ready to blow their four-eyed minds, sir. Figuratively speaking. Of course. Just remember, we're looking to build bridges, not show off, Bennett cautioned. Of course, Davis replied, though his excited expression suggested he was looking forward to displaying human technology. Soon after, Captain Morgan arrived with her team, Chief Science Officer Alan Wright, Engineer Sam Peterson, Dr. Nancy Evans from Medical, and several other specialists. They took their positions around the table, reviewing notes and preparing materials. At precisely the scheduled time, the main doors opened. The Zarkonian delegation entered, led by a figure Bennett recognized from transmissions as Vexator himself. The High Admiral had exchanged his elaborate battle uniform for something slightly less ornate, but still impressive. Behind him came Ambassador Krell, looking uncomfortable, and 13 other Zarkonians of varying skin colors and clothing styles. Bennett stepped forward. High Admiral Vexator, welcome aboard the Defiant. We're honored by your presence. Vexator gave a stiff, "Thou, Admiral Bennett. The Imperial Council has authorized me to conduct cultural and technological exchange discussions." He seemed to struggle with the unfamiliar concept. Excellent. May I introduce Captain Lisa Morgan? She will lead our exchange team. Morgan stepped forward with a warm smile. Welcome, all of you. Please make yourselves comfortable. Unlike their previous visit, the Zarkonians took seats around the table without complaint about the equal arrangement. Bennett noticed they were eyeing the human crew with a mixture of curiosity, wariness, and in some cases barely disguised excitement. Perhaps introductions would be a good place to start, Morgan suggested. One by one, the members of both delegations introduced themselves. The Zarkonians included military strategists, propulsion engineers, weapons specialists, a xenobiologist, and even a cultural historian. A diverse group clearly assembled to learn as much as possible about this puzzling human species. Once introductions were complete, Morgan spoke again. We've prepared several demonstrations and information exchanges. But first, I'd like to open the floor for questions. What would you most like to know about humans and our civilization? There was a brief silence, then one of the Zarkonian scientists raised a hand. Your shield technology. How does it absorb energy instead of just deflecting it? Engineer Peterson smiled. An excellent question. It's based on our understanding of quantum field manipulation. He launched into an explanation that was technical yet accessible, using the room's displays to show diagrams. The Zarkonian engineers listened with rapt attention, occasionally interrupting with questions that showed their quick understanding. Another, Zarkonian, a female with deep blue skin markings, spoke next. Your gravity manipulation fields. Our scientists theorized such technology, but considered it impossible to implement. We had the same challenge, Wright admitted. The breakthrough came when we discovered the relationship between dark matter and gravitational constants. He began explaining, with Davis adding technical details. As the exchange continued, Bennett moved to stand near Vextur, who was watching silently. Your people learn quickly, Bennett observed quietly. We have always valued knowledge, Vextur replied, though typically we acquire it by conquering those who possess it. He glanced at Bennett. This method is different, but potentially more beneficial for both sides, Bennett suggested. We learn from each other rather than one destroying the other. Vextur made a sound that might have been acknowledgement. As the technical discussions continued, Bennett noticed a Zarkonian cultural specialist becoming increasingly confused as she studied the displays showing Earth's nations and governments. Is something troubling you? He asked her. These images of your leadership structures, she said. I do not understand. You have multiple systems of governance on a single world? We do, Bennett confirmed. Earth has nearly 200 independent nations, each with its own government. The Zarkonian looked stunned. Yet you present a unified force in space? How is this possible without an emperor to command all? Dr. Miller joined the conversation. We cooperate through choice rather than force. Our United Earth government was formed by agreement, not conquest. And your leaders? They are chosen by the general population? The Zarkonian asked, clearly struggling with the concept. In most Earth nations, yes, Miller explained. We call it democracy. Leaders serve the people, not the other way around. And they can be removed without violence? The cultural specialist was taking rapid notes now, fascinated. Usually through regular elections, yes, Miller said, though the specific processes vary between nations. The specialist turned to a colleague. This explains much about their approach to conflict. Their entire social structure is based on cooperation rather than dominance. Across the room, Dr. Evans was explaining human medical technology to an enthralled Zarkonian xenobiologist. This regenerative technique could extend Zarkonian lifespans by centuries, not just decades, Evans was saying. And it doesn't require any genetic tampering, just cell stimulation. The Empire would pay countless resources for such knowledge, the xenobiologist replied. Evans smiled. We don't want payment. We're happy to share medical advancements. Health isn't something that should be hoarded or sold. The xenobiologist blinked rapidly, clearly confused by this approach. As the day progressed, the initial tension gave way to genuine exchange. The Zarkonians became more animated, asking increasingly detailed questions and occasionally sharing their own knowledge when it surpassed human understanding. During a brief break, Bennett overheard two Zarkonian engineers speaking quietly. Their approach to energy distribution alone would solve the resource conflicts in the outer dominions, one said. And their social structures, do you realize what this means? The other replied. The rebellions we've been fighting for decades. Perhaps they had a point. Be careful with such talk, the first warned, looking around nervously. Bennett pretended not to hear, but exchanged a meaningful glance with Miller. By the end of the day, several Zarkonians approached Morgan with an unexpected request. Captain, one of the scientists said, we wish to continue these discussions. Perhaps some of us might remain aboard your vessel as observers. Morgan looked to Bennett, who nodded subtly. We would welcome observers, Morgan replied. Cultural exchange works best with prolonged contact. As the main delegation prepared to return to their ship, High Admiral Vexatur approached Bennett. Your people are not what we expected, Admiral. Is that a good thing? Bennett asked with a small smile. I am not yet certain, Vexatur admitted, but I will say this. In 10,000 years of Imperial history, this is the first time we have encountered a species that could defeat us but chose not to. That merits consideration. Bennett nodded. Perhaps that's the beginning of true understanding. Vexatur didn't reply, but his customary arrogance seemed diminished as he departed with his reduced delegation, leaving 5 Zarkonians behind to continue the exchange. Well, Davis said as the doors closed, I think that went rather well. It's a start, Bennett agreed, a very promising start. 6 months after the first contact between humans and the Zarkonian Empire, Admiral George Bennett stood on the observation deck of the USS Defiant, watching Earth grow larger in the view screen. After their extended mission in deep space, the sight of humanity's home planet brought a sense of peace and accomplishment. Captain Lisa Morgan joined him, also gazing at the blue-green world. It looks exactly the same as when we left, she said. Hard to believe how much has changed out. There, Bennett nodded. The United Earth Council is waiting for our full report. I'm not sure they'll believe half of it. Behind them, the door opened to admit Dr. Susan Miller, accompanied by 3 Zarkonians in simple blue robes. These were not the same observers who had first stayed aboard the Defiant. These were official ambassadors, sent directly from the newly formed Zarkonian Transitional Council. Admiral Captain, Miller said, our guests wanted to see Earth with their own eyes before we dock. The lead ambassador, a female named Talara who had once been a mid-level Imperial bureaucrat before the changes, stepped forward. It is indeed as beautiful as your images showed. So much water. Our ancestors evolved from aquatic creatures, Bennett explained. We still feel drawn to the oceans. Perhaps that explains your adaptability, Talara mused. Water takes many forms, flows around obstacles rather than always trying to break them. Morgan smiled. That's quite philosophical. I like it. The communications panel chimed. Admiral, came Engineer Paul Davis's voice. There's a transmission you should see. Patching it through now. The view screen split, showing Earth on one side and a news broadcast on the other. A Zarkonian reporter stood in what appeared to be a large city square filled with thousands of citizens, marking the third major world to peacefully transition to representative governance, the reporter was saying. The former Imperial governor has agreed to serve as advisor to the newly elected council. Protests continue on 17 other worlds, though most remain peaceful, following the Transitional Council's announcement that all systems may determine their own governance structures. Bennett exchanged a look with Miller. It's spreading faster than we anticipated, he said quietly. Miller nodded. Ideas can be more powerful than weapons. The broadcast continued. In related news, the first joint human-Zarkonian research facility opened today on Zarkon Prime. Scientists from both species will work together on medical applications of gravity manipulation technology, with all discoveries to be freely shared across former Imperial territories. The screen showed a ribbon-cutting ceremony where human engineers Ryan Clark and Olivia Martinez stood alongside Zarkonian scientists, all looking proud. Turn it off, Talara said suddenly, her voice strained. Davis cut the transmission, leaving only the view of approaching Earth. Bennett turned to the ambassador. Is something wrong? No, Talara replied after a moment. It is simply overwhelming. 6 months ago, I served an empire that had remained unchanged for 10,000 years. Now, she gestured at the screen. Everything is different. Change isn't always easy, Morgan acknowledged. Even positive change. Some resist, said one of the other ambassadors. 3 outer systems have declared loyalty to the old ways. They call us traitors to imperial tradition. Bennett nodded. We expected some resistance. Reform never comes without struggle. But the majority support the new direction, Talara added, straightening her posture. They have seen what cooperation can achieve in just these few months. Technologies that improve lives, freedom to speak without fear, the right to choose one's path. And what about High Admiral Vex Tour? Bennett asked. The last we heard, he was addressing the Transitional Council. Talara made a sound that humans had learned was Zarkonian laughter. That has been the greatest surprise of all. After his initial report on your species, many expected him to lead the resistance against change. Instead, he has become one of our most vocal reformers. Really? Morgan looked genuinely surprised. He says his perspective was transformed by your demonstration of power without destruction, Talara explained. He now argues that the strongest civilization is not the one that conquers most, effectively, but the one that can choose not to conquer at all. I'd like to meet him again, Bennett said, under these new circumstances. You will have that opportunity, Talara replied. He is already on Earth, preparing for the signing ceremony. The Defiant continued its approach to Earth, soon entering orbit. As they prepared to shuttle down to the surface, Bennett received one final report from Davis. Admiral, you should know, there's quite a reception waiting. Apparently news of our diplomatic victory has made your crew something of a celebrity group. Bennett sighed. We didn't do anything special, Paul. We just refused to fight when we didn't need to. That's not how Earth sees it, Davis replied. First contact with a major galactic civilization, and instead of war, we got an alliance. The public is calling it a miracle. Hardly a miracle, Bennett said. Just common sense. Hours later, Bennett stood on a stage in Geneva, headquarters of the United Earth Government. Beside him were Captain Morgan, Dr. Miller, and the rest of the Defiant's senior crew. Facing them were thousands of people gathered in the Grand Plaza, with millions more watching via broadcast. On the other side of the stage stood the Zarkonian delegation, including Talara, several other ambassadors, and to Bennett's surprise, High Admiral Vex Tour himself. The former Imperial commander wore simpler attire than during their first meeting, though his posture remained proud. The Secretary General of Earth approached the podium between the two groups. Today marks a historic moment not just for humanity, but for interstellar civilization. The signing of the Galactic Cooperation Treaty establishes peaceful relations, free exchange of knowledge, and mutual defense between Earth and the former Zarkonian Empire, now the Zarkonian Republic of Worlds. Applause thundered across the plaza. As the ceremony continued, Vexatur moved to stand near Bennett. If someone had told me 6 months ago that I would be here, the High Admiral said quietly, I would have had them executed for insanity. Bennett smiled slightly. Life is full of surprises. Indeed. Vexatur looked out at the crowd. My people called me a conqueror. For 3 centuries, I led imperial fleets to subjugate worlds. I believe that was strength. He turned to Bennett. You taught me otherwise. Your people taught themselves, Bennett replied. We just offered an alternative perspective. Before Vexatur could respond, an aide rushed onto the stage and whispered urgently to the Secretary General, whose expression grew serious. The Earth leader motioned for Bennett and Vexatur to join him away from the microphones. We've just received a deep space transmission, the Secretary General said quietly. Another empire, much larger than the Zarkonian, has detected the political changes and is sending a fleet to investigate. Vexatur's gills fluttered with concern. The Dragsoth Dominion. They have twice our former military strength. They will see the Republic's transformation as weakness. Bennett looked at Morgan, who had joined them. Well, Captain, it seems our mission of exploration continues. Morgan nodded. With new allies this time. Vexatur looked between them. You would stand with us against the Dominion? Of course, Bennett said simply. That's what friends do. Besides, Morgan added with a small smile, we're getting quite good at these diplomatic introductions. As they returned to the ceremony, Bennett felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey ahead would be challenging, but he was confident in humanity's approach to the galaxy, not as conquerors or victims, but as partners in progress. The future, vast and unknown as space itself, beckoned with promise.